Hello and welcome to another episode of Design Under Influence. I'm your host here, Alex Osenenko. I work at a company called ArcIT. We do, you guessed it, IT for design, engineering, and architecture space. That's all we do. And I have some super guests today who do something a little bit different. They help folks migrate and set up their software going from AutoCAD into a BIM world, which is Revit in our case here. So, ladies, I do want to say hello. Maybe we'll do this very quick. Megan or Elizabeth, can you, or maybe take turns, introduce yourself real quick and tell us about the company, because you're running this very successful consulting gig. We have a lot of clients together. Things are gelling. So talk a little bit about your business and then we'll jump right into the topic.
Sure. I can jump in first. So I'm Megan Hansen. I actually started Aurora BIM almost 2 years ago, and I set out originally to just help people become successful with BIM. That was the whole point of all of this. I saw the struggles that the firm and the firms that I was working with prior to starting the company were going through, and I just really wanted to be there and to help people harness the power that Revit can bring to a project, and to really learn how to create beautiful drawing sets, which most people believe isn't possible. So, long story short, that's
cool. Welcome to the show, Megan.
You.
Elizabeth, what's up?
Hi, Elizabeth Rickardson, or Liz. I have been working with Megan for a little bit more than a year, but just since January as her official partner in crime at Aurora BIM. It's been really fun. I was an early adopter of Revit and have gone from being, in the trenches doing drawing sets all the way through to high-level BIM management, and now back down into the trenches, I'd say, helping Megan to, spread the love of BIM and the way of working that way, and help our small to medium firms, embrace it and find the right way forward.
So, the wonderful world of BIM, you say. I hear different halabaloo around there, and the thing what people say a lot or are concerned about is the drawings and why are they costing so much more. So your team helps with that for clients that need you to land, parachute in, help with some drawings, set up some templates, and then parachute out, and then wait until until they need you again. But why is this so much more expensive, or it seems that way?
I can take that first. So BIM is completely. It's a completely different workflow than historic drawing production. So historic drawing production, right, was by hand for a long time, which took many, many hours. And then they streamlined that by moving it into an automated computer software, AutoCAD and others. And essentially that way of working was, taking the 3D world and translating it into a two-dimensional line by line drawing. And in doing that, there's plans and sections and elevations that all need to coordinate with each other and be put back together into a three-dimensional building. The problem with that people, were experiencing all the time was the ability to change the design and modify things in those 2D drawings and get those modifications to be reflected in the whole drawing set. So you move a wall in a plan, you've got to move it in every section it's visible in, every elevation it's visible in, every detail that it was visible in. Everything that was affected had to be manually updated. So the whole point of Revit, was to revise instantly, which is what the name of the software comes from. And because of that, the way that you work in Revit is you build a 3D model, so completely different than drawing lines for your plans, section, elevations. You're building a 3D model first and foremost, and then you are slicing it and cutting it into pieces, into plans, sections, and elevations. And you're not drawing lines anymore. You are controlling the way that model looks when you cut through it. And the frustration people have, right, is that those lines don't look as similar to AutoCAD as they would prefer, and they don't have as much control over each individual line. So you ask why it costs more in the beginning, because you're building this 3D model. There's a whole other, that's like a whole workflow, in addition to the workflow that you have to do up front now, instead of, you're just doing that in the end when you build the building. And there's many, many benefits to which we'll get into later, as to why you want to do this.
Liz, you got to.
Yeah, and I would also say that the transition between drawing by hand to AutoCAD was so much simpler, because it was, instead of using a pencil, you used a mouse and you still drew a line and it still represented something. Whereas when you transition from AutoCAD to Revit, it is a totally, as Megan said, totally different way of working. Now we're working with objects. If that object doesn't exist, it needs to be created first. And so there's this parallelization of like, I can't just open the program and start. I need templates and I need content and I need to understand how to do it. So not only does the actual project itself feel like it takes more time and energy in the beginning, but implementing Revit does in the start.
Yeah. Very good point. Yeah, for sure.
When you, in your, professional travels between clients and projects, have you seen, like, what is the biggest difference between a successful transition and kind of the one that stalls out? Maybe you can talk about, like, in two perspectives. One, the people, and two, maybe the decisions, the leadership, and maybe the type of projects. One is easier. Kind of open up a little bit of a color into that space.
Well, I can start with that. I would say, first of all, willingness, not only from the management of the company, but from all the individual people in the company, that they're open to adopting this. I jokingly say it's a little bit like when you've broken up with your ex-boyfriend, but that's all you talk about. And we're like, yeah, but we're in a new relationship now. Could we stop talking about AutoCAD and focus on Revit? Just like letting go of the old ways and the old workflows. And yeah, we can discuss how a drawing looks or the method you used to work and try to use similar things, but we're in a new relationship now. So we need to forget the past. So that can be tough. And then also when companies try to straddle both AutoCAD and Revit at the same time, it just causes a lot of rework and cost and frustration. And so that's what I would say are the biggest factors. What do you think, Megan?
Yeah, I agree with both those. I'm trying to think of the other ones that would really be a barrier to actually, successfully making it through the transition. I'd say content is a big one. I think, being willing and ready to have someone create content or create content yourself, and making sure that you're giving your team the tools that they need to be efficient in creating these drawing sets and these models, because that is one of the most frustrating parts. Like we mentioned, when you're working in Revit versus AutoCAD, is that you need to have the objects that you need to work with in 3D created prior to working, or you have to create them while you're working. So it does slow you down. So the more prepared and the more template setup and content creation you can do prior to starting, the better. So yeah, that would really slow down a transition if you're not really ready to put the time in to create all of that in the beginning. It'd be really hard to just say, here's a Revit, out of the box template from Autodesk, and build me a drawing set that looks similar to our old drawings. That's like almost an impossible task. Yeah. And it's often the expectation. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I if I stay quiet, maybe I get some more out of you. That's
we have lots of thoughts on all things.
I was also going to mention training, though, because I think that training in Revit is different than training in AutoCAD, because a lot of owners will ask us, like, can't you just do a training program? Well, we can, but unless there's an actual project to work on, it's really hard. We oftentimes send absolute beginners away to watch some YouTube videos, or just to get the basics, so you know where the buttons are and how to click around and how to navigate. But then you need to have a project, and that's usually the next best thing. And then to understand that project's going to take longer and it's going to cost more. It's going to be a loss, but it's a training project. And that's okay. And that's really how you learn.
How many losses? Let's give you an idea. Like, some of the better companies that made that successful jump, how many projects would they be losing, or they should budget on losing and just expect it before you think the advantages will start coming? Now, like all other things, I know different firms are different, but let's say like residential, you're sort of more or less normal firm.
I think it depends on the people in your company and where they're at. You might have some go-getters that just got out of college and they can learn this, they know the software, they're ready to absorb the information that we can give them. And, it's really hard to put a number on that. I would say, I know that like you can incrementally expect better results as you repeat this process. So if you have a lot of projects that are similar, that is the ideal kind of situation where we can come in and really help you set yourself up for success when you are repeating these similar projects. I'd say there's too many variables to know. Like I've seen firms take 2 years. I mean, there's some firms that have been trying this for 5 years that are still, they say they're losing money on these projects. So, and I think it is because they go into it kind of with that mindset that they should be able to open up Revit out of the box and recreate what they were creating in AutoCAD without any of the setup. And I think that is just, you're just setting yourself up for failure right out the gate. So, yeah.
Yeah, we've go ahead. Les.
I was going to say there's two things in there. The first is what Megan touched on about younger people. And this is a problem for sure in architecture, is the hierarchy that you have, your principal architects, and then it filters down, and you come in and you should do 5 years of drawing toilet details and stair details before anyone will ever listen to what you have to say about anything. And that's a problem because usually it's the younger people coming into firms or in firms who know how to use the software, but they're not really listened to by the hierarchy because they're just youngins, they don't know anything. So that's something we're also trying to help change, that you can still be the old, super experienced, gray-haired architect who makes beautiful buildings, but you might need to lean on someone who's younger than you would expect to actually know how to use the software and the program and move around and do it in a really efficient way. So that's also super, super important, I think, to try to discuss the people. It's usually the people.
The people, yeah.
I like this. So we've put together a long podcast series on AutoCAD conversion, which is a version of BIM.
Yeah.
You guys are aware you don't necessarily have to love it, but it's out there.
We pretend it's not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, where I was going with this is it's a 10-step process, and each step, like it's a 45-minute deep dive, and we had to cut a lot of content because it just got too long. It's a serious endeavor, and I take my hat off of people. I've spent a lot of time in software in my a lot of my various businesses and gigs in the past, and migrations are tough and painful, but it's like it will open up a world of opportunities. And so let's talk about that. But before we go to the world of opportunities, I do want to give you, Liz, a little nod. Inside joke, Willard Williams-esque kind of a analogy that you've done there with the boyfriend girlfriend thing. Good, we getting there. So cut it off, stop talking about it. Move forward.
Yeah, move on. Yeah,
you're gonna start like kind of crying and anyway. But I want to kind of get back to dollars and cents for a moment, because if business owners or decision makers are watching this, at the end of the day, is the consulting fee for Revit dollar for dollar, hour per hour, I should say, same or higher than AutoCAD consultants? Sorry, it was a long-winded question, but I wanted to know, like, for reals, if I AutoCAD shop, I'm hiring consultants at this rate, are you more expensive?
I guess I want to make sure that we're differentiating between the consultants and the technicians that are actually doing the work, right? So like we come in as consultants and advise on the templates and the family creation and all of that. But then there's also the production people that they're going to hire to actually do the drawings. And I think, yes, in both cases, they are higher, and they should be, because you are actually building a building. You're not just copying lines from a markup from an architect or an engineer. You are building the structure, and you need to be able to cut through that structure, and it looks as accurate as you can get it to look as to what the real world condition is going to be. So that in itself means it's going to cost more. You need almost, an engineering background or an architectural background to really be successful at building a building without, a lot of assistance from the architect or the engineer that you're doing it for.
And then I would also say that one of the reasons why it feels so expensive, and I agree with Megan, that if you hire one of us to build your Revit model, it is going to be a higher hourly fee. It's going to be a higher hourly fee for anyone who's good at Revit. But the architect then needs to explain to the owner, the one paying the bill, that, okay, but you're not just getting dumb lines. Like, here's a plethora of things you're getting for that price. And I think that a lot of times architects and engineers are not even aware, and they could be selling more, or they could be explaining why this hourly price is so much higher because here's unlimited 3D views. Whereas before with AutoCAD, you could buy 2 or 3 and they cost, a couple thousand each, and they took hours and hours to do. So I think that's also an education thing, of educating our clients of all of the freebies they get out of the model, and all the things they can offer their clients, that then their clients would be more willing to pay a higher hourly rate because they actually are getting more for their money than they were in AutoCAD.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
In previous conversations, you've mentioned to me that a lot of owners starting to require that, the Revit kind of, 3D models versus, drawings, flat drawings. And have you seen companies or heard of companies losing business because they're just unable to, commit to a bid and specifications?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's usually why they come to us because they can no longer, it's kind of been a long, 15, 20 years since Revit came out. And, there was the early adopters, and then there's the shops that were like, we're just going to keep doing it in AutoCAD until we can't. And it's coming to the point where they can't, because they aren't getting projects because of the requirements, and they're not ready for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they're agreeing to a project and not understanding what they're agreeing to produce because you don't really understand all this BIM nerdy stuff. And then that's when you get in real trouble, because then it's not just, oh, we lost money on a project. We're getting in trouble because of a contract breach, or we're unable to deliver what needs to be delivered.
Yeah.
Wait, so let me understand this. Sorry, if I interrupt, I want to clarify. People who run AutoCAD bid on projects that require BIM kind of output, and then they decide to do it in BIM. They haven't done this before.
They don't realize what it is, or they think, oh, but this is fine, because AutoCAD does work in 3D if you really force it. AutoCAD Architecture, which is a terrible program, but so they can say, yeah, but those. I would also flag up another thing here, which is that oftentimes when bidding, the people who are doing the bidding are the owners of the company, are the people maybe who aren't in the trenches anymore, aren't really working with the software. They read this and they think, yeah, but we bought a Revit license 2 years ago. We can totally do this.
Yeah, we have the software. Yeah.
And so instead of going to the people who are actually going to do the doing and say, could you read this through? Can we actually do this or not? And all of a sudden you get it in your lap that in 2 weeks I need to do a solar study on a building that doesn't even exist yet in Revit, or I need to do a wind analysis, or I need to, come up with LEED standards. And you're like, but I don't know how to use the program to that level. So it can be that, or it can be the deliverables that you need to be able to deliver a high quality 3D model at a certain level of detail. And those signing the contract don't even understand what LOD means.
Yeah, I think all of that is right on point, Liz. And I think it's not necessarily like engineers or architects bidding on projects when they know when they know they can't meet the requirements. I think it's most of the projects now, if one of the team members is in Revit, they are kind of assuming that the rest will follow suit, because that's the most effective way to then coordinate and, progress through the design and set yourself up for success later. So, there's still sometimes like, the consultants that are still in AutoCAD, and you do have that coordination with those and Revit. And I think it's in those situations where you do, like Liz said, you have the license for Revit and you're like, well, why don't we just try it? But they don't have any of the templates set up. They don't have their content. And then they get frustrated. And then their project goes way over budget. And it's just like this huge, like, negative experience in the beginning because they weren't prepared to take that on. So, yeah.
I would also point out that it's not just firms and owners of firms who need a bit more education or need to be guided by BIM professionals through it. It's also the facility owners who are creating these requirements, because sometimes they just, oh, BIM, that sounds awesome, and I want everything. And they write up a huge list of requirements and what they want delivered. And when you actually sit down and go through it with them and say, okay, all of this is possible, however, are you willing to pay for it? Because this is extra and this is extra, and this will require us to do a lot of upfront stuff. But if you really need this data out in the end, then absolutely it can happen. I mean, and I've seen big hospital projects back in Sweden where they had this requirement, everyone's working in this software, you have to work a certain way, and then they allowed all the consultants to kind of do whatever they wanted, and then it gets to the endpoint and everyone had to redraw it in another software. So it's important that you have a BIM professional in the beginning to help all the parties sit down and discuss how are we going to do this together, and also to ask hard questions to the owner who's taking these files and this data at the end, and what are you doing with it, and how can we make sure it's formatted for that use, whether it be a facilities management software or paper drawings, hopefully not. But yeah, what are we doing in the beginning and what are we doing with the end, and how can we make that flow work for everybody involved?
And I'll just add one thing. I think, Liz, you brought up a really good point, that oftentimes in the room in the beginning or historically, the BIM professionals were not there. You don't bring your drafter into a meeting with the client.
Right.
But moving into the BIM realm, especially if, you as the architect or the project manager or the engineer are not familiar with how much time and what, saying yes to something they've just asked you to do in Revit means, you definitely need to have that person in the room early on, like Liz said, to make sure that those conversations happen before you're committing to a budget that just isn't realistic.
Right.
So you ladies definitely helped save someone's bacon for sure. Given all that advice on sort of how not to, get over your what is it, ski poles? Get over your skid tips.
I don't know.
You're from Sweden.
I don't know. I pretend to be.
Go over your ski tips. I think that's what it is. But anyway, you get the point. So let's. This was good. I think it's a great little bit to help people understand why the BIM services seem more expensive. Why someone should expect to lose a little bit of money initially and get a lot more effective and efficient, be able to sell more projects down the line and not too far down the line, hopefully. And it's been great to understand why not to bid on things without, if you just have a Revit license and don't have a real skill and or a little bit of horsepower with that program, but BIM yet. But I want to finish with this, and I want you take it wherever you want to go with it. But where do you provide most value? Like, let's not even talk about companies like yours. Let's just talk about your company. If you were hiring you, what would be the scope of work that would be ideal for the best possible output?
You want to go first, Megan?
I don't ask easy questions.
Yeah, that was kind of, I'm like trying to think of like what that would look like. I think we get brought in as firefighters a lot. And I think it would be a lot easier for us to come in at the beginning and help you plan and strategize and help you through the transition versus jump into an atmosphere of people who are frustrated. And we oftentimes say we're not here to sell you on this. We're here to help you. And we do have to say that a lot sometimes because there is still a lot of reluctance and the dreaming of the ex-boyfriend. And
nice one.
So
gotcha. People just kind of, oh man, I wish.
Yeah. Like the ideal client is like excited about it. They're at the beginning. We've got some projects lined up that we can help them work through. The best scenario for us is to actually do a project with the client. So like they give us markups and then we take Revit from being a basic template and we evolve it as we do that project. We're looking at their standards that they used to have in AutoCAD and we are making that project look as much like the AutoCAD standards that they created back when. And we are helping create this template that then they can use on repeat, the template and the families and the content, everything. And that initial push takes a while. So, it's a project with a longer lead time that we can take our time on and we can go back and forth on like, okay, we'll very much let the clients know if there's something that they're really trying to force that used to be the way it looked in AutoCAD, but it's going to cause extra work in Revit, we will highlight those. There aren't that many, actually. There's less than people think, but they do occur, and we definitely make sure that people are aware of those. So I'd say ideal client, right at the beginning, bring us on and have some projects teed up that have longer lead times, and you have a culture that's ready to embrace the change, or at least a team within the culture that's influential to the rest of the team that can embrace the change and spread it throughout the company. Yeah.
And I would say, piggybacking on that, why hiring, well, us specifically, but and I don't know of other companies who have a similar setup as we do, is that if you were to hire a BIM manager to your office and they're 100% dedicated to setting up your office's standards and practices, they are only one person. They bring whatever they have in their brain to the office. And with us, we are many people. It's Megan and I, it's our colleagues behind us, it's our whole network of nerds that we deal with. It's also the fact that we're working with several different clients at the same time, that I could have solved an issue with doors with client A that now client B has, and I've already solved it. So I don't need to spend the time. So I can bring all this knowledge between clients and share it. And that's actually one of the parts of our standard terms and conditions, is that we are going to share content and knowledge, because that's why you're hiring us, is that you don't just get my brain, you don't just get Megan's brain, you get all our brains and all of our experiences through all these different companies, because there really isn't a reason to reinvent stuff over and over and over again. So we add that value. And the last part is just that once you are up and going, because that's what we want. We don't want to be fighting fires for you always. We want you to fight your own fires, you to be able, as a client, to run your own business successfully in Revit. Maybe you just tag us in when things get really out of control or something complicated comes along. But what we also can provide is that as a small and medium firm, I know it's hard to ramp up and down. So if you have a bunch of project work coming in, you can tag us in. We'll come in and help you. We can be fast. We've already been in your templates. We understand the way you work. And then it doesn't hurt our feelings if on a Monday you need help for 2 days and by Thursday you've restaffed and you're like, thanks guys, no more. Sure, we'll go off and do other things. So that's another value that we add to our clients, I would say.
Awesome. Well, that was pretty comprehensive. I appreciate that. And here's the thing about that sharing of knowledge and getting exposure to multiple brains that have already existing solution. This is what our firm does too. Like as ArcIT, we only serve architecture, design, and AAC space, right? Engineering space. And their problems repeat. Their software fails in same way every time. Some other IT company would spend hours, you get bills, you get big bill.
Yeah.
Every hour is a bill. And then, then all of a sudden it's all like, why do that? If you can bring somebody who's done this 40 times last year. Exactly the same problem. So those problems repeat. We bring efficiency to other organizations, to our community. I'm very, very grateful for our partnership too. We're going to continue this show for hopefully many more episodes. A, it's a pleasure to just hang out with you, and B, I think we're sharing some mad tips, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
Hopefully,
worked with lots of different IT companies in my travels, and it's been really great working with you all whenever we have a shared client, because I know that you're going to be responsive and you're also going to figure it out in the world of architecture and Revit. It's not just some random piece of software that you don't know anything about. You have this knowledge. That the desktop connector is a bit finicky. It needs to be updated quite often. These little bits, as you pointed out, that you don't have to relearn every time.
Yeah.
That's been really good.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for your time. If people want to find you, or if they want to find, go Aurora BIM, and I'm sure, you can just look up in Google, or ChatGPT or whatever floats, what the latest thing is, and depending when you're watching, or if you need IT for architects, we're pretty good at SEO. Just type in IT for architects in Google, and we'll be the first ones because we know how to do SEO. Anyways, it was a pleasure, ladies. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the next one. And I just, again, it was an incredible show, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
It's been great.
Thank you. You too.